Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I know it's been a while. August has been really busy. I had lots of stuff going on, went on vacation, did some fun things that you guys will see in the next couple videos. It's finally time to start posting again, and today's video is going to be about some of the things that I've noticed in the exotic pet industry that are kind of the dark side, if you will, of exotic pets and all of the things to do with them. So not everything is always, sunshine and rainbows. We hope that it is for the most part for all of the exotic animals, but it's not always the case. So this video is going to go over a couple things that I've noticed in the exotic pet trade that are kind of iffy. It's not anything that anything has done, it's just facts about the industry itself that are kind of lame. There's certain things that are unavoidable for the most part, but are just facts of the trade that kind of suck. So we're going to talk about a couple of those in this video, and we're going to start with normals. Now, in most of the lizards, snakes, animals that we keep, there is something that's considered a normal, which is the typical wild-caught version or the typical patterning and coloration of an animal. So this is true in ball pythons, it's true in corn snakes, it's true in geckos, it's true in all sorts of different animals. There's certain colors and patterns that we see in nature that aren't quite as favorable in the industry anymore because there's so many of them. With the normal morphs of pretty well any of the species, they are very easy to find and tend to be very cheap. So there's one of two things that usually happen with the normals that are not so great. Number one being people will purchase them because they're cheaper, but they don't really have any idea about the animal itself. So they don't do any research, they don't know the care needs, they don't know the housing needs, they don't know the feeding needs of that animal. They just got it because it's on the cheaper side, they can afford it, they want something cool, and rather than spending $300+ on a fancier morph of that animal or of any exotic pet, they just go with the regular standard normal morph that for corn snakes can be like $60, and they don't really know how to take care of it, so that animal's welfare is not necessarily as good as we would want it to be. On the other side of this, with those normals, sometimes they just don't get purchased at all. So you'll have the normal babies in your clutch of eggs, in snakes, whatever it is, and those babies won't get adopted as frequently. They sit on the shelves, quote unquote, quite literally on the shelf. Most people have snake shelves that they use to keep their babies. They sit there for a long time and they don't get adopted because that's not what people want typically. So they take resources, they take space that could be used for a more interesting animal, and they end up getting sold for even cheaper, and then the cycle kind of repeats itself again. They're sold for cheaper, so they go to somebody who doesn't really know much about them or doesn't care as much, they're just getting it because it's cheap, and it kind of restarts the cycle where the animal's welfare is not good. Now I actually have an example for this. Let me go get him. Ta-da! So this is Phineas. He is a normal morph corn snake. He's been at our local pet store for about a year now. He's pretty well full grown. He's about 3-ish years old as far as what they're aware. Somebody had him, they ended up surrendering him. He's been there at the pet store for about a year. He was sold pretty heavily discounted to me because he's been there so long. But he's super, super pleasant. He's a great snake. It's just the fact that he is a normal morph that people just don't want them. He is beautiful to look at. Like, his colors are gorgeous. When I got him, he was actually in shed, so he was a lot more brown than this. But since he's shed, his kind of reds and oranges have come out, which is super nice. But snakes like him don't really get adopted that frequently, and if they do, they're sold pretty cheap because they're just normal. There's nothing special about him. They don't know if he has any hets for any special genetics, which is the only other reason that people will typically get normals, is if the snake itself is normal, but its parents are something cool, it holds those genetics, so sometimes people will buy those. If you don't know its genetics or it's just a full normal snake, people don't really want them. So they end up sitting on shelves or in stores for a really long time, and they just take up space that people would rather use for an animal that they can sell for $200, $300 plus. So he's our newest addition. He's wonderful, super fun to hang out with. He has a very derpy face, but I love him. I have 2 corn snakes already. They are part of a breeding project. One of them has no scales or is scaleless. The other one is a snow, which means he's albino and axanthic, so he has no other colors to him. Albino and anerythristic. So he's just white, basically. So those 2 I have for breeding scaleless snakes in the future. I just got him because 1, I felt bad that he's been there for so long. 2, he's a very good animal to show size comparisons. I'm planning to do shows with him so that I can show people the difference in sizes, because right now both of my future breeding snakes are babies. So they're not very big at all. And that kind of brings us to our next point on this list. So the next point we're talking about is surrenders. So like I mentioned, Phineas was surrendered to the pet store near me by somebody else. And in fact, a lot of their stock that they have are surrenders. They're just animals that people bring in and drop off, and that's it. They either can't take care of them or whatever. They bring them to this pet store, and then the pet store finds them homes again. So a lot of the times, pets that are bought without knowledge of it or without really knowing what they need will end up being surrendered eventually. And that's often because people don't have the time to take care of them, or in the case of, let's say, a corn snake, they start out as itty bitty babies and end up like this. They don't have the space for them, and they're not prepared to purchase larger enclosures for them. I'll show you the size difference actually. 1 second. So this is Prunella. She is my little baby corn snake. She's the scaleless one. But look at how big she is, and look at how big he is. So people buy this, and they're like, I can deal with that. But then they end up with something like this, and they're like, I can't take care of that. So they just get rid of it. It's a reptile. People don't think they have feelings. They don't care in the same way that they do with like dogs or cats. So they just surrender them, and that's it. But that's a really, really common reason for surrenders. And reptiles are harder to find homes for because a lot of people have, there's stigmas about snakes and reptiles and how they're slimy and dangerous, and people have fears of them more often than not. So they have a lot more difficulty getting them adopted out to people at the end of the day. So that's another part of the reptile industry where normals don't really do so well and surrenders don't do so well. 1 second, I'm gonna put her back. Actually, I'm gonna put them both back. A last note before we move on, a lot of the common surrenders that I've seen at the local pet store is crested geckos, corn snakes. If ball pythons were legal where I live, there would probably be ball pythons as well, just because those are some of the most common pets in the reptile trade. They're the easiest to get your hands on. They're the most affordable for the most part if you're just getting something plain. But they're also, by that merit, the most commonly surrendered reptiles in the industry. Because they're so easy to find, you can buy it without really thinking about it, and then you're not prepared for what it actually requires of you. With that being said, I've noticed the box on my lap. This brings me to my last point about the dark side of the pet industry that I wanted to talk about today, and it's related to wild-caught animals. So all of the pets that we keep in captivity in the exotic industry were once wild-caught. So they were taken from the wild, kept in captivity, and then over generations and generations of breeding them, we've gotten to the point where most of the snakes and lizards and stuff you get today are not wild caught. They're all bred in captivity and have been for many, many generations. But there are certain instances where these animals are still wild caught. And there's a couple things that come from that are not so great, but are a part of the reptile industry or the exotic pet industry. Now, that being said, I'm not 100% against wild caught. In order to keep some of these in captivity, we have to catch them from the wild because we don't have any in the hobby right now. The way it was said to me that kind of resonates a little bit is for some of these creatures, in a couple of years, they will only exist in captivity because they are dying out in nature. So it's kind of a give and take with this aspect and with this point where some good can be done, but a lot of bad has already happened. So, as an example, this is a vampire crab. Vampire crabs are native to Southeast Asia and places like Indonesia, and they're super cool pets. They're very, very small. I'm gonna get Crabula out so that I can show you, but the thing with them is most of the time, if you are going to get these as pets, they are probably wild caught. So any of like the aquatic pet stores that are getting them are having them directly shipped in from places like Indonesia. Shipping conditions are probably not great. They are often not shipped in a way that ensures that they will survive. So they ship them in large batches. The ones that survive, survive, and the ones that don't. They are territorial, so if they're shipped in a big box with a bunch of them, they will it stresses them out and they will probably fight and kill each other. So just the practices of wild-caught animals being shipped over to North America, the States, and Canada are not super great. They're not regulated in a way that protects the species and protects the specimens that are shipped in. This also can affect their native populations because they are getting to the point where they're popular. They take more and more of them from nature, and that decreases their populations in the wild. So in a sense, us wild catching them and bringing them in reduces their population, but we're also trying to preserve them in the long run. So there's a fine line that we haven't really figured out, which is why this is on the list. It's a very tricky subject. There's other species as well that are kind of in the same boat, where they're wild caught, they're brought in big boxes with a bunch of them. Some of them die in transit. They often arrive sick. Either they're injured, they have parasites, they have an illness of some kind, and the person getting them doesn't really know what they're getting until it arrives. The process and the practice of shipping in these species is very touchy. It's a touchy subject. However, this is Crabula. I didn't get these from a pet store. I didn't get Crabula from a pet store that had them shipped in. I got him and all of his children that this person had. I got them secondhand, so she was already trying to get rid of them anyway. I decided to take them, and I'm going to do my best to get them to reproduce in captivity. That way they can be offered as captive bred rather than wild caught. So if the wild caught specimens aren't being adopted as much or aren't being purchased as much, it kind of reduces the amount that they need to take from nature. So if I can, hopefully at the end of this, provide an option where they are captive bred to preserve the native population and still allow people to appreciate them as pets, that's what I'm trying to do. So let me get Crabula and I'll show you why he's so cool and why I want to make this happen. There we go. Good job. This is Crabula. So Crabula is a vampire crab. He is a purple carnival vampire crab, from what I've been told. This is about as big as they get. You can keep them communally as long as you have enough space. Because they are territorial, you want to do 2 females per male at least, and you should keep no more than 5 in a 10-gallon tank. So you can kind of play with the tank size and how many you have based on that. And they reproduce fairly prolifically as long as their setup is up to par. But they're just so cool. I'm gonna see if I can get closer. So he's just so beautiful. He's got these bright, piercing eyes, which people assume that's why they're called vampire crabs, because they've got these bright yellow eyes and they don't like light a whole lot. They don't actually drink blood or anything like that. Haha, I know. They're just so cool. Let me see if I can get his face. Their little faces are so cool to see. Walk now. They're just so interesting, and it's kind of a step above having like a bug. You can see he walks and kind of tastes things on my hand as he goes. But they're such fascinating little creatures, so I'm not surprised that people are getting them shipped in. I just wish that they went about it in a little bit of a better way. So, with that being said, I've made all the points that I need to make about the exotic pet industry at the moment. I know it's been a while since I posted, so I really appreciate it if you stopped in to check on this video after all that time that I was away. If you could like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, something like that, it really helps the channel out, as it helps me know that people are actually watching and appreciate the videos that I'm making, and it draws more attention to the channel so that I can reach other people. Don't run so fast. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, where we talk about kind of the darker side of the pet industry, feel free to let me know. I can definitely make more videos. There's more things to talk about than just these kind of 3 points that I went over today. As always, remember to do your own research, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! Good job, Crabula. You did it! You're a star!